Hey guys, Teresa here. Welcome back to my channel, Lost My Thread. Today is a tier ranking of every free sewing pattern I've ever made, part 2. This video is very much a sequel to one that I made 2 years ago where I did a tier ranking for every free sewing pattern that I'd made up till that point. I will put a link up here and down in the description box if you do want to check that one out. What I will say though is there are patterns that I mentioned in that video that are no longer for free, and I think that is a good reminder that if there are any of the patterns that I'm mentioning today that you like the look of, that you might want to download at some point, I would say do that sooner rather than later because they may not be free forever. Something else I'm doing differently this year is that last time I only included garments, but I realized that there are some other really good free patterns out there that I think are worth a look, so I'm putting those in this time as well. So I'm gonna first describe what my tier ranking system is. Do not download this pattern is for patterns that I feel like are really just not worth your time. They're not worth your time to print out the PDF, put them together, cut out your fabric, sew your garment up. You will most likely not be happy with the garment at the end of it, or at least that was my own experience. So these are ones that I'm only telling you about to be thorough, but I really would not recommend these. Don't Say I Didn't Warn You is for patterns that are not terrible. They're not the worst patterns. You may well end up with a garment that you like at the end of it, but there are some major flaws, and there's a good chance that you're going to have to maybe make some adaptations or adjustments or have to figure so much out on your own that it's maybe not worth it for you. So I'm just saying you might want to try these, but approach with caution. I See Why It's Free are for patterns that are okay for a free pattern. If I had paid for these patterns, I would definitely not be impressed. I would be pretty upset that I parted with my own money for it. But for a free pattern, I think they're okay. I'd Sew It Again is for patterns that are actually pretty decent. I enjoyed the process of making these up. I like the garment that I had at the end of it. They're not new favorites or anything, but I think they're solid. Well Worth Your Sewing Time is for patterns that are good patterns, like really good ones. I recommend them. I think if you like the look of it, I think they're a really good one to get to bring into your wardrobe. I enjoy these patterns. I think they're a hit. Wardrobe Staple is really for patterns that I feel like have become genuine staples in my wardrobe, and I feel like that I'm likely to want to go to these patterns time after time to keep making garments, and I feel pretty confident that whatever I sew using these patterns is going to turn out to be a new favorite in my wardrobe. Download This pattern is for like the extra special. There is something really stand out about this particular pattern. So these are things that I would say if you do like the look of it, genuinely go and download it now because it's so good. It may not be free for a long time, and I really do want as many people as possible to get this pattern. I will also be putting details of how to access all these patterns down in the description box. So on to the patterns. These are in no particular order. I'm going to run through them in the random order that I've got them, starting with the Elemental Pencil Skirt by Sew House 7. Now this is a pattern that started off in a smaller size range, but they've actually now expanded to their full size range, which I think is really good. This is a knit pencil skirt, so a jersey stretchy pencil skirt. I think it's a decent pattern. I don't think it's a bad one. I feel like the overall shape and fit I'm pretty happy with. It is a very easy, simple construction. The instructions are really good. The main thing I don't love about it is the finish on it. So the way that it's constructed. So the way you make this one is you actually put elastic, you sew elastic around the raw edge of the top of the waist, and then you fold it over once and then stitch it onto the sides. And I feel like for me, I don't love that I just have that bit of a like raw elastic that's visible. It tends to flip up quite a lot when I'm putting it on, and I feel like at times the fabric starts shifting a little bit underneath. Maybe if I had like a really structured fabric over the top, like a ponte or something, it wouldn't do it quite so much. I don't really know how I would change that though, because if I did a top stitching around the bottom of the elastic, you'd have more the look of a channel, which I don't like. I think if that's not going to bother you, it's okay, but it really does bug me, and it just doesn't feel as professional to me. It just has that feel of a pattern to me of a freebie. I see why it's free. Next up is the Uvita top by Itch to Stitch. So this is a very relaxed fit t-shirt, and I think it's useful to have different types of t-shirts in your wardrobe. This is not fitted, it's not overly boxy, it's just a little bit loose and relaxed. It has a drop sleeve and a long sleeve option. I've been tempted to make this one actually without adding the long sleeve and just having it as a bit of a drop sleeve silhouette. I really like this top. So this one has a really nice neckline. It's almost like a boat neckline, kind of a wide neckline. It is a very easy one to construct. The instructions are definitely really good on these ones, as this one as well. I feel like it's a great pattern, but the biggest drawback is the size range. So this one is in their original size range, which is not very impressive at all. I would love it if they would update the size range on this one, because this is my favorite relaxed fit t-shirt. I've made one version, but honestly, this is one that I have plans to make multiple versions of. Anytime I want like a slouchy relaxed fit t-shirt for wearing at home, loungewear type stuff, this is genuinely the pattern that I'm going to go for. So I feel like I have to say this one, even though it's not perfect, I do think it's well worth your sewing time. And then we have the first one that is not a garment. So this is the Costa Tote by Helen's Closet. I know it feels a bit pointless to include a tote bag because tote bags are pretty simple. You could make a tote, I could make a tote, self-draft it, figure out the proportions, dimensions you want. I've done that before many a time, but I will say none of them turned out with the exact size and proportions that I like as much as I like this tote bag. I will say this is a fantastic beginner project. If you have not sewn anything before, I think you could easily put this one together. It's a great scrap buster because a lot of the pieces actually aren't that big and you can make something really cool and interesting without very much fabric. This has the potential to either have a pocket or no pocket on the outside. I chose to have the pocket. I'm not really ever going to say no, or rarely going to say no to a pocket. I really love that these are some really big roomy pockets as well. So it goes around the whole front and back, this angled pocket, which I think is a really cool and interesting detail. And then there's stitching going down the center on both the front and the back to separate it into 2 pockets each side. So 4 roomy pockets on a tote bag is pretty great. I also made the choice of making mine reversible by choosing a lining that I would potentially like to have as my outer fabric as well. This one has a boxed bottom as well, so a rectangle at the bottom to make it even roomier inside. A really good size strap as well. I feel like this one's really comfortable to use and wear. I've made one of these and I have it at work, and I am jealous of my work self for having it at work. It fits my laptop, loads of equipment. I want one in my everyday life as well. I feel like if you are interested in a tote bag and you don't feel like drafting your own tote bag, I really don't think you can go wrong with this one. It's silly to be talking about this as a tote bag and thinking of it in these terms, but honestly, I'm gonna call it a wardrobe staple. Then we have the Core Tee by Closet Core Patterns. This one is a true boxy top. So it's a t-shirt, but it's meant to be much more boxy and oversized on the body. What I like about this t-shirt is that it's not just too big. It doesn't look like you put on somebody's too big t-shirt. It fits really well, again, across the shoulders and the high bust area. The sleeves are a good size, but it's just boxy in the body. Another thing that I really like about this one is the chest pocket. I feel like it's just the right size, just the right location to just be a cute little extra detail. Obviously, this is not a functional pocket, it is a decorative pocket, but I think it looks really cute. This one comes with 2 lengths, so there's a semi-cropped, which is what I made, and I really like for wearing over high-waisted pants, shorts, skirts. There's also a hip length version if you prefer a longer version, and there's a short sleeve or a 3/4 length sleeve. I've just made the one, but this is one that I would definitely intend to make again at some point. I really like the one that I made. Just depends on the kind of style you're going for a t-shirt, but I think for a boxy tee, this one is really top notch. There's also some really nice details in the instructions with how to have a really professional finish, where it's sort of bound around the back of the shoulders and the back of the neckband, which I've seen on ready to wear, and it's nice to have that as just a technique to use in any t-shirt that you're making. It really does have excellent, really thorough instructions. Again, a really great beginner friendly knit pattern. I feel like they really hold your hand with this one. I'm gonna have to call it another wardrobe staple. Now this next one I really went back and forth about whether to include, and I decided to include it because it is technically a free pattern. Now I paid for this pattern. I actually bought this with the Great British Sewing Bee Sustainable Style book. The patterns are designed by the ladies behind Selkie Patterns, and I really like a lot of the patterns in here, this jumpsuit in particular. However, the pattern pieces are available to download, but you do not get the instructions. So this is something that you would have to figure out how to construct yourself. Considering how complicated of a jumpsuit it is, that may be a challenge for a lot of people, and that may really not make it an option for you. If you've made a boiler suit style jumpsuit before, you're probably gonna be fine. If you have made a shirt before, you might be okay. but I do think you could potentially have some stumbling blocks. It's nothing crazy about the construction, but it's just sometimes hard to know what different notches are meant to be for, particularly because there is some gathering on here as well. So the thing that I really like about this pattern, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, that's really probably my favorite jumpsuit that I've ever made, which is a lot to say because I really love a jumpsuit and I've made a lot of them. But the things about this one that make it unique is a lot of the feminine touches. So there's some gathering into the sleeve head, but relatively subtle, nothing too crazy, just a little bit there. And there's also some gathering under the back yoke, which is a really lovely detail. There is shaping on this one in the back as well. So there are pleats at the bottom of the bodice and also at the top of the trouser. There is a self tie with belt loops going around to get a little bit of extra cinching in at the waist. These sleeves are a 3/4 length sleeve that you just turn up to hem, but there are sleeve tabs inside here so that you can roll the sleeves up and then button them in place, which I think is always a wonderful detail. And I think it really ties this whole jumpsuit together. This is a button front, as you can see, with a shirt type collar, but I would say it's not a collar stand type collar. And the button placket, if you are interested in sewing this pattern up and figuring it out just using the pattern pieces, it's a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance generally for most of it, but there is the button band either side. You fold each side in by 1¼ inches, 1¼ inches again, and top stitch them down. I think besides that, you could probably figure out how to make this pattern on your own. Now, there are also bust darts, which are fantastic, so I was able to do a full bust adjustment quite easily for this one, and I'm really happy with the fit that I got. The trousers are a really great shape as well. I would say they're kind of like a straight leg trouser. I'm not sure if there is a taper. If there is, it's ever so mild, but it's not a wide leg. They are more of a straight leg trouser with some good roomy pockets as well. If you really like the look of this jumpsuit and you feel like it is a bit beyond you to make it without the instructions, I'm sure you could get this book secondhand for not that much because it's not a recent book. So something to bear in mind. But if you think you could make it without the instructions, by all means, go ahead. It is genuinely one of my favorite jumpsuits that I've ever made. There's lots of opportunity for stripe play, which you can see on the version that I made. I absolutely want to make more versions of this jumpsuit. So because of the lack of instructions, I feel like the highest I can put it is don't say I didn't warn you. And then we have the Standing Tall Quilt by Cedar Quilt Co. This pattern was designed by Helen of Helen's Closet in her other brand. So she has a sewing pattern brand for garments, and then this is her quilting company. So this is a free pattern that is intended to be made with jelly rolls pre-cuts. And something I really like about that is that way you don't have to, well, for one, there's less cutting going on, which is lovely. You get these strips that you just have to cut into sections for the main bulk of the cutting. But then additionally, if you buy a jelly roll pack or fabric packs that are intended to be sold as a whole set, you know that they're gonna go together. I feel like buying fabric online is so difficult when you're not quite sure of color, and I've definitely become unstuck before with quilting cottons, thinking that things were gonna coordinate and they didn't because they look different on the screen to how they look in real life. So if you don't have the option of going shopping face to face, this is a really good way to know that you're gonna get fabrics that are cohesive. Even if you're going face to face though, I feel like it's just a nice way to know that it's gonna work. I really love the overall look and design of this one. I will say it's a very modern looking quilt. There's a lot of quilts that are quite intricate and busy and complicated. This one, I like the simplicity of it. I like that you have those boxes of different colors going together with this border around it, which could be seen as like a border or a frame. I really like having mine with a cream background, but you can also do a dark color. You can even do like a really busy print going around as well. But I feel like it might not help the design of the pattern to stand out quite so much. This pattern comes in 4 sizes, so there's a baby, a throw, a twin, and a bed. I made the bed size, which fits very well on my king size bed. The only thing I will say is it is long, like really long. I know that Helen and her partner are both really tall, and so I suspect they have like a longer than average bed, maybe more like a super king or something like that. And as a result, I feel like it probably fits well on their bed, but it is like falling over significantly over the edge of my bed. I don't know if I would do anything that differently next time though, because I don't think it would work that well if I took the whole bottom sort of section off. I think it would not be quite long enough. I don't mind that much that it hangs over, but it's just something to think about. So obviously they do give you the full measurements of the finished quilt before you sew it up, so that can help you decide what size you want to make. I do think this is a really good one for a first quilt. However, I think you have to be willing to do a little bit of extra research. I've sewn a lot of Helen's Closet patterns before, and usually her instructions are incredibly detailed for garments, and an absolute beginner could pick those things up and sew them with all the information they have in the pattern. I wouldn't say the same for this quilt. There are sections, for example, where she just says to bind the quilt, but if you've never bound a quilt before, you don't really know what that means, and you have to do a little bit of Googling, checking your friend YouTube, and figuring out how to do that. I think that's fine, and definitely there are lots of different ways to do things with quilting and lots of different preferences of ways to do things, and I think that's why she didn't want to be too didactic. But for me, it was just a little bit of a letdown compared to her other patterns when I was used to that with the garments. I actually did a quilt along for this pattern with my friend Sarah of Sew Sarah Sewed. I'll put a link to it down below if you want to watch us working through this quilt together. I think considering how much I love my finished quilt and how much I really enjoyed the process of those like smaller blocks coming together, creating that overall look, I did really like it, but it's not like my ultimate. There were some downsides. I'm sticking it in well worth your sewing time. Next up is the Luna Tank by Helen's Closet. I seem to be on a little bit of a run of Helen's Closet patterns. The Luna Tank is a knit tank top that is meant to be very, I mean, not even A-lined. I want to say more like a trapeze style top. So it's really voluminous at the bottom. It is shorter at the sides than it is at the front and the back. It has really nice binding detail around the neckline, around the armholes, and she gives you a couple of ways to do that if you want to have a little bit of a neater finish or more of like a straightforward construction, which I do appreciate. There were a couple of things that I didn't love about this pattern. So one is when you're looking at the finished garment measurements, because there are two lengths on this one, there's like more of a cropped and a bit longer. If you want to figure out what length you want to make, it's really difficult because the measurement she gives you is from the shoulder to the bottom of like the front or the back of the top. However, it's really the side, the shortest part, that I would like to know like where that's going to hit on my body. So I ended up trying to measure tops that I've made before, measure the pattern piece and figure it out from there, but that was a bit of a drawback for me. The top is also meant to be left raw at the bottom of the hem, so the idea is that you use a lightweight floaty jersey fabric that will kind of flap around and you don't want any extra weight hanging at the bottom. This helps to keep it free and loose and open. Most jersey fabrics don't fray, so I think that's okay, but that doesn't mean that they look as good after many washes as they do when you first cut them. I definitely find that jersey fabrics, if I don't actually hem them, they will often start to look just a little bit, I want to say like dirty, mucky, rough, not as neat. And so it, for me, makes this top feel a little bit less polished. It doesn't feel as professional, and it definitely puts me off a bit. The biggest drawback for me, though, that is kind of a deal breaker is that because it is so big and wide at the bottom, and you're supposed to be using a lightweight jersey fabric to sew this up, if you go outside and there's a little bit of a breeze, the whole thing lifts up and reveals way more than you ever probably want to be revealing to your neighbors. So for me, even just taking photos, I was like pinning everything down as I was going out, and it occurred to me that like I'm not really sure how this could be different for anybody. I think if you want to make this to wear at home, it is very comfortable. Like the whole loose floaty thing is definitely very comfortable, but it's just not very practical for leaving the house, which it's not great. So I feel like bearing all those things in mind, I'm gonna go with I see why it's free. And then our Sam apron by Helen's Closet. So this is an apron pattern that has a couple of views. So it has the standard like halter neck type view, or it has one that does a crossover at the back. This apron has a lot going for it. So for one, it has different lengths. I appreciate that it comes in different lengths. And so you can make ones for someone less than 5 foot, someone over 6 foot, and lots of different in-between points. So it's a really great one for gifting. I've made it once as a gift, but I could easily see this being another one that's worth gifting and also just making for yourself, obviously, as well. This apron also has a lot of potential for some cool top stitching if you want to use a color that pops a bit. There are chest pockets as well as waist pockets, so you get a variety of different sizes. There are also some loops for hanging a towel, which is a fun detail. Definitely feels very chefy. This is an apron that I feel like if you have it, you're gonna use it like pretty much every single day. And I feel like the finish on it, the details on it, for me feel very high end, very professional. The one that I made and gave to my dad, I feel like looked really just like top notch. I was really proud of how it came together. It feels to me like a pattern that you would expect to pay for because of the amount of options, because the amount of attention to detail. I know it seems weird for an apron, but I feel like I have to just put it in wardrobe staple. Next, we have the Hansie top by Seamwork, which I am modeling for you guys today. It's the top that I'm wearing. So this is a relaxed fit woven top. It's a relatively simple design. It has bust darts. It has a grown-on sleeve. The neckline is finished with a facing, and obviously you could choose to do it a different way, but the idea is that you sew a facing on and then you actually top stitch around it, which means it's anchored in place. It's not going to be flopping all around. I am overall really happy with how this came out. I did do a full bust adjustment on this one because I have a larger bust, but I fall into the smaller size range. So this is a pattern that has a B size sewing cup for the smaller sizes, D size sewing cup for the bigger sizes, and obviously we're not all gonna fit into those categories, but it has bust dart, so it was easy to do a full bust adjustment. I did feel like the hip was a little bit tighter than intended, and so I ended up cropping mine, which is fine. I don't mind that it's a little bit cropped anyway, but I feel like I would be a bit cautious of that and probably size up in the hip if I did want to make it a bit longer. This one also has a chest pocket, but it's one that for me kind of hits the mark. So for me anyway, I feel like it's quite a large pocket, and it's also pretty off center. So I feel like if I did want to add a pocket detail to a woven top, I would want it smaller and I would want to play around with pinning it in place before I stitch it in place. I was trying to make it as designed just to see how it was going to turn out. It's not bad. I don't think you even particularly notice it on this top, but it would probably bug me more if it was on more of a solid fabric or something that was a little bit more visible. There is something really great though about having a just go-to boxy woven top that you know is going to fit, that's going to be straightforward to construct. Good instructions on this one as well. I feel like this one has to go into I'd Sew It Again. The Belemnite dress by Marilla Walker. Now this is another one that I paid for. So I bought this pattern with the intention of making a dress for Christmas, which I did last year. I bought this from her Etsy shop before Marilla Walker closed her Etsy shop. So I was really sad that her patterns weren't available for a while, and then she made the decision to actually put a lot of her sewing patterns out for free because she's no longer selling them. Now I have to say her patterns are so good. She's definitely very professional, really great instructions, really interesting, unique design, the layouts, the diagrams. It feels very like personal and very artistic. I really like her whole aesthetic. I like the look of a lot of her designs as well. So if you are interested in getting this pattern or any of her other patterns, I would say pause this video, head on over to her website. I don't know how long she's going to make these available for, but she actually has quite a few patterns that you can get for free. And to me, these are patterns that you should be paying for. They are so good that you should be paying for them. This dress comes with technically 3 views. So there's like 2 views and what she's calling a bonus view. The first view, or view A, comes with a button front, a grown-on sleeve with quite a long ruffle sleeve. So it's gathered into that drop sleeve. It's quite long, I would say, a little past elbow length. It's not quite 3/4 length from what I could see from the pictures. And then the second view, or view B, has no buttons at the front. It has a zipper at the back to be able to get it on and off. And it has a yoke going from the front to the back, and the sleeves are grown on from the yoke all the way down to a gather at the cuff. This one has just really interesting shaping. It obviously has really interesting design lines. There are ties going around the waist for both of them that are secured at the front of the yoke. There is a lantern shape to the skirt, so it kind of goes out and then down, which is a really unique and interesting shape. I feel like this would be so great with fabric with a little bit of structure, like the linen that it looks like she used in the model photos. I made it in a drapier fabric, and I feel like some of those design elements were a bit lost, so I am happy with the dress that I made. The third view, or view C, is essentially view B with some adjustments. So there's some additional gathering going around where the sleeve area joins onto the front yoke, and then there's an elastic at the cuff, so you get a fuller sleeve, more volume. This dress is so cool, so unique, genuinely doesn't deserve to be free as far as I'm concerned. This is easily a download this pattern. Next we have the Hattie Elastic Wide Leg Pants by Tiana's Closet. Now this one I've actually made quite a lot of versions of. I've made 2 woven trousers for myself, a jersey trouser for myself, a woven trouser for my mom, and I mashed this up with the Luna Tank by Helen's Closet to make a jumpsuit for myself, which I truly love. highly recommend. That was definitely a really great pattern mashup, so I'm really happy with that. However, this is not the best pattern. It's what I had, and I didn't have another elastic waist pattern that had side seams that was going to suit the styles that I was looking for, but I've now found another one and I don't think I'm going back to this one. What I will say about this one is it is super basic. The website feels very junky, if I'm honest. So there's a ton of pop-ups on this website. There are links that make it look like you need to click on it to download the pattern, but you don't. They're links to I don't know what you're going to be downloading, so definitely be very careful on this website. The instructions are basic to say the least. So it's basically just like a few points for instructions. There's no illustrations, diagrams. You need to understand what you're doing to be able to follow the instructions. The pattern pieces, again, very basic. So there's no pockets on this one, which to me is just a waist for an elastic waist pant. They do give you a link to a tutorial of how to add pockets to a side seam, which I guess that's okay, but once you're printing out your pattern pieces, it would be nice to have that in there and just be printing everything out together. For me, that is definitely going to knock it down a bit. I love that it's a really big, wide leg, but I will say there's quite a lot of positive ease in this one. And the main reason that affects me is because I have quite a smaller waist than hip. And so as a result, there's just a lot of extra bulk under the elastic waistband. And I feel like that's really largely just to do with the fact that it's already a bit loose in the hip. So by the time it gets to the waist, it's like extremely big. And I don't love the overall silhouette that it gives me. I also don't love that the waistband is put together in such a basic way where you just create a casing, stick the elastic in, and then close it up. I feel like you need something to secure that elastic in place. You can just sew down at the side seams just to make sure that it's not going to be flipping and twisting. Personally, I prefer to do some rows of top stitching going around the waistband. I feel like that looks really professional, and I also feel like that keeps the elastic nice and secure. But literally just having it loose in there to me is asking for trouble. I think considering the fact that I've clearly made it plenty of times to the point where it's not obviously a complete write-off of a pattern, but it's also one that now that I've got a better one, I'm not going back to. I feel like I just have to say, don't say I didn't warn you on this one. Next up is the Harvest Boxy Top by Pattern Runway for Peppermint Magazine. Now, Peppermint Magazine used to have all of their patterns for free, and I had recommended them in my previous video. There's other ones that I'd sewn up between then and now that I'm no longer recommending because you do have to pay for those ones, but this one is still available for free if you are interested. However, I really did not like the way this one turned out when I sewed it up. So the thing that appealed to me and the reason I wanted to try this one is because I had quite a lot of small remnants, like strips of fabric left over from a previous project that I wanted to turn into something. And somebody had actually recommended this pattern to me. So thank you to whoever did recommend it. And I'm sure this pattern is fabulous for you, but it is just not a great one for me. So the thing that is nice about it is all the different sections that you have on this top. So there is a section at the top of the bodice that is like a little strip of fabric at the front and the back. You also have the cuffs going around the sleeves that are little strips of fabric. You have like a middle section of the top and then a hemband as well. So this design is really good for using up scraps. The back even has a button band on the back. So again, the sections on the back are really not very big. So it is good potentially for like color blocking, playing with stripes, using up small scraps. But the issue I had, this is a boxy top and it is very boxy. It's like really boxy and in the way that I don't love that it's boxy absolutely everywhere. So it felt like it was just too big and hanging off of me. But the particular problem that I felt like was just never going to work for me was how ginormous the armholes were. So when I was putting my arm up, you could basically see like my whole bra. It was ridiculous. And for me, it's just like, if I can't put my arms up, I can't wear this top. So it is pretty much a waste of my time. What I ended up doing was taking the top that I'd made and actually laying another pattern over the top that I know fits me well and cutting it out. And I was able to do that because this was so huge. So I feel like it's one that maybe for you, maybe for your size, it's gonna work well, but I would just be pretty careful. You might wanna narrow the armholes at the very least, but I feel like it's just not a silhouette I'm going to be reaching for. I really don't love this one. I'm going to say don't download this one. Next up is the Pearl Soho crossback apron. Now this is one that's actually a tutorial rather than pattern pieces, because it is just like straight pieces of fabric that you can just measure and cut out, which I see as a real bonus. The biggest downfall for this one is the fact that it is a one size fits all pattern, which in reality means it's gonna fit some people and it's not gonna fit lots of other people. So if you are about the size of the model that they had for this pattern, you're probably going to be pretty satisfied with it. If you're significantly smaller, you might feel like you're swimming in it. If you are bigger, it's not going to go around you in the way that I think it's intended to. Now, this is not meant to go around completely in the back, but I guess there's a little bit of wiggle room, but I still feel like there's an ideal amount of wrap that you want for this apron. This apron does have quite a clean look, and I liked the look of it. So this has some pockets that are just sort of in a side panel rather than at the front. It obviously has this crossover section, which I really like the idea of. It's how you get the apron on and off. So I like the idea of not having to like tie an apron around the back and have to like work to get the neck length just how you want it. I like that you can adjust the straps when you're putting it in to make it exactly the right size for you. Now I will say the length of the straps are huge. I think I cut something like 14 inches off the length of these straps to get it to sit right on my body. So for sure, if you're very tall, this is still gonna work for you. That's not the issue. It's more just about the size going around. So for me and my size, I actually wish I had an idea of what the kind of, I don't want to say ideal size or intended size is, but I would have made those side panels and back panels a bit wider had I known how it was going to fit me. I really love how the front section fits though. I like the width of that front section, and I have seen another tessuti pattern for a very similar kind of apron that's also one size fits all that looks wider on the chest, and I actually don't like the look of that. I think that would be too wide for me. So the center section I would always keep the same. But if I was making this again, I would probably add an inch to the side and also the back panels, giving me an extra 4 inches overall. And I think I would be a bit happier with that. The other thing I will say with this one, and this seems like a little bit of a crazy thing to say, but I feel like the pockets on this one are actually verging on being too big. The pockets are so deep on this pattern that when I straighten my arms at my side, the tips of my fingers are barely reaching the bottom of these pockets. Now, if you have smaller arms than me, you might not be able to reach the bottom of the pocket. And it is very awkward to have to like pull the apron up to get into what is in your pocket. So I don't love that about it. I would be tempted to try and make that a little bit shorter on future versions, but I'd have to play around with how to do that. It is a really cool design though, and I made it for Christmas, so mine's a little bit kind of wild and colorful, and I used some block printing. I would like to make one in more just like a plain color, but I would, like I said, just add a little bit around the width. I think it's probably one that I see why it's free. The Sport Shorts by Friday Pattern Company. Now, this is one that I feel like is probably going to be pretty divisive. I know that there are a lot of people who have made these shorts who love these shorts. All I can talk about is my own experience, my own personal preference. I do not love these shorts. If you saw my video from my hits and misses from 2025, I'll put a link to it down below if you didn't. I talked about these shorts in a lot of detail and why they were definitely a big miss for me. I was just really disappointed because I wanted to love these shorts so much. I love the look of them. I love the style of them. I love the bias binding detail going around the leg that goes up into the side seam. I love that that is mirrored on the angled pockets. They look so cute. The shape, the fit on the models look really, really good. They are just not the same on my body. Now, I will say I did lengthen the inseam on these by 2 inches. I wanted a 4-inch inseam, which is just more comfortable for me. Happy with that adjustment. I think that turned out really well. But I did also lengthen the rise based on the finished garment measurements. And I feel like something must be a bit off there because they ended up so high rise, it was not even funny. And I did end up with a lot of excess bulky fabric just below the waistband. And if I pulled them down so that they were not sitting so high, then they were too tight around the hip. So some of that will be because of the adjustments that I made, but I also feel like if they're not giving you accurate measurements, then how are you not gonna fall into those kinds of traps? I feel like one way or another, I would have liked a little bit more room around the hip on these as well. The other thing for me is those pockets are tiny. I like a good pocket if I'm gonna have pockets. And these ones, when you go into them, obviously they're only gonna be as deep as the leg of the shorts, right? And if they're short shorts, they can't be that deep. but they could be a lot wider. They're quite a narrow pocket. I'm surprised they don't go further along. And I don't know if that's just to do with the silhouette they're trying to create. I think it could have gone all the way to the like center seam, and I don't think that would have been a problem, but I just don't love a pocket that's not very functional. My biggest problem though with this pattern really was the recommended construction. So the way they get you to put your bias binding around all those pieces is to just take your fabric, stick the raw edge into your double folded bias binding and top stitch across the whole lot, which for me is what I always think of as like kind of the cheater way to put in bias binding. I'm not saying I've never done it, but I will say whenever I've done it, I felt like I was being risky and there was a good chance that my fabric wasn't going to be quite inside and something might slip out, and especially when you're washing over time, things might start to fray and come apart. It is a very risky thing to do, and I think especially when we're talking about curves on those shorts. So those edges, if you're going around a circle and you're trying to just like push that fabric into the bias binding, I feel like it's pretty impossible to have it all the way against the edge of the bias binding as you're going. So if you are making these, I would very much recommend what I think of as like the standard way to put in bias binding, which is to unfold your double fold bias binding, match up right sides together, the raw edge of your binding with the raw edge of your fabric, stitch around in the fold, and then flip it twice again so that it's folded under itself on the other side, and you can then top stitch around all the way. That for me is how I wish I had done it. My shorts came apart and I repaired them at least 4 times already. I'm really hoping it's not going to happen anymore. It makes me a bit sad that that's going on, but it's definitely not a pattern that I'm going to be going for again personally. I feel like I just have to say, don't say I didn't warn you for these ones too. And finally, the Blama Tank by Paradise Patterns. Now, this is another one that I actually paid for because I didn't realize you could get it for free by signing up for their newsletter. And I'm not unhappy that I paid for it. I felt absolutely fine paying for it when I got it. I thought it was a really good pattern. The instructions are great. I feel like the construction is really nice the way it comes together. There are actually multiple bust cup sizes for this pattern across the whole size range. So you could do a B size cup or a D size cup for any of the sizes, which is a huge delight for me because I generally fall into the smaller size ranges, but I have a larger bust, so I often have to size up on that. The D size sewing cup, so the larger bust cup size, actually has darts in this one, which I really like. I feel like that's probably something that not everybody would love in a jersey tee, a jersey top, but I feel like there's just no way you're gonna get as good of a fit, as good of everything falling and not causing creases as you are with a dart. I think the shape, the fit across the high bust and full bust was spot on for this one. This is meant to be quite fitted. It's got negative ease going down to the hip, and I personally don't want it that tight around the hip. So I ended up cropping mine a bit and graded out a bit on that. So just look at the finished garment measurements so you can decide for yourself. This is intended to be cut in quite a bit around the armhole, which is very much the style at the moment. I know a lot of people really love that style. I think it looks really cool, but it doesn't work with my bras. I feel like I don't have a single bra in my wardrobe where it's not pretty visible when I'm wearing this tank top, which does put me off wearing it. I did add some thread chains with snaps so that I could try and secure my bra strap a little bit further over, but it still doesn't work that great. There are instructions of how to change the armhole and the neckline if you want to, which is what I would do in future versions. And I really do want to make this one again. I feel like it has a really unique and nice shape to it. It's a very popular one in the sewing community, and I absolutely see why. I think depending on your own personal style, it could easily be a wardrobe staple, but for me, I'm gonna have to go with well worth your sewing time. I hope it was fun to get my brief thoughts on all of these sewing patterns. I'm sure that there will be people who completely disagree with me with some of these patterns, but there will also be probably people who are saying the same as me. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on any of these patterns. If you think there are any that I've missed out on that I should know about, that I might like, please do let me know those in the comments down below as well. If you did enjoy the video, please do give me a like, subscribe to my channel to see upcoming videos, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!